Welcome, everybody, to the Captain's Council. This is session number 2. I'm excited to talk to you today about leadership and influence and finish up talking through the story of Mel Fisher and the 3 beliefs that are required for you to really push through all of the different situations and failures and successes that you'll have this upcoming season. And so to start off, what I'd like to do is have you all reflect on how the team's been doing since our last session. And so the first question being, what has your team been struggling with recently? The second is to have you write down 3 things that you feel like you've done well so far as team captain, and then write down 3 things that you feel like you need to improve upon. Once you've completed the first activity, the second one is to do a quick overview of session 1. And some of the questions that I had for you were to think about what were the 3 beliefs that I talked about in the story about Mel Fisher that helped to push him through all of the failures that he essentially had, and to help him to endure ultimately till he reached the success that he did. The second being the 3 mental models that I discussed that were important and supported the need for team captains. And the third was the high-level overview I provided to you of what the roles and responsibilities of a team captain should be. So I hope those 2 exercises went well for you. And what I'd like to do is get into session 2's core message, thoughts, and models to help you move forward. And as we discussed in the last session about Mel Fisher, he had 3 beliefs that he felt were, that not just that he felt, that were important to help him endure all of the failures that he went through over a 27-year period that helped him to reach the goal optimally. And those 3 were, the first being that a treasure existed that a lot of people felt like was not the case. The second one is that he would be the one to find that treasure. And the third would be that the journey was worth it at the end of the day. And the reason I picked this story, I think it really correlates well to the team captaincy journey as well. And so the first one being this idea that there is a treasure that exists. And the way I correlated that was that you as the team captain are the treasure, and that you matter. And I think that's something you have to believe in, that there's research backing the fact that if you want to be the best team that you can be, it's going to require the highest influencers on the team to go about, have the right process, do the right things, and decide that every day when they wake up that they're going to be the ones to push everybody to be better, to get bought in, and to win that battle over the team between the top 10% and the bottom 10% for the middle 80%. And that is kind of what belief number 2 is. Every day Mel Fisher woke up, he said, today is the day that I'm going to find that treasure. And that's the same approach you need to have. It needs to be aggressive. Every day you wake up, you say that you will be the one to do it. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And I think the best way to go about that is to discuss, when we say that you will do it, the idea is that you will influence, and you will influence appropriately. So we're going to talk about what leadership is and what influence is, because I think that's one of the best ways I've ever heard leadership described is, the standard definition that we see is that leadership is this ability to influence and inspire other people to achieve this common goal that we all have. And influence is a particular word that I want to hone in on, because I think it makes leadership much more tangible. And one of the biggest problems I see within teams is that when I go and talk with the coach versus the captain, they have different definitions. And I know last session we had you all think about how you all want to define it, and how you want to define it is however you want to do that. As long as there's alignment there, I think that's what matters. But this idea of influence makes a lot of sense to me, and it's very simple and tangible again, because it has to do with behavior. And And I think that there is a lot of science behind behavioral psychology, why we do certain things. There's just quite a bit more there that's, again, more tangible. So that's the way I like to define it. And influence, I think, to influence people, three things that team captains should really take away is that influential people shape viewpoints. They're able to get people from being not bought in to bought in, from being late to practice to not being late to practice. They're able to challenge others effectively and have crucial conversations. Those are usually easier when you've been able to get the buy-in and respect that's required to be able to shape their viewpoints in the first place. And then ultimately, you can't influence anybody if you talk one way and walk another. So you have to model the way. And to the right here, you'll see this framework that's called the 6 sources of influence. That's not something I'll dive too in depth with today, but it's a framework by Joseph Grenny. I highly recommend your coach take a look at some of his work and look more into what he has to say. But essentially, this framework here to the right has 6 sources, which breaks down the different ways that we are influenced. The first being in our personal and individual motivations and abilities. The second, the third, and the fourth are in the social interactions, the ability to harness peer pressure. And the fifth and sixth are in this row of this aspect of structural influence. And this is really where the coach lives, where they are what I like to call the environmental architect, so to speak. And they really focus in on what's happening in the environment. Levin's equation says that behavior is a function of a person in their environment. And it's up to the coach to really think about how he crafts the environment in a particular way to make sure his culture and the behaviors within the culture match his vision. But for the team captains, I think these 2 boxes here are the most important. This idea that social pressures are very real, and I would say that it's way more than just a third of our overall influence. This doesn't take into consideration how powerful these are. But the team captain, and team captains plural, the ones who make or have the most influence on the social behaviors in the program and the team. And that matters because of the type of culture that you have. Ultimately, comes down to the behaviors that occur within the program. And that's the process, right? And our process are the things that we can control, which ultimately drive the results that we get. So it's vital. And one of the reasons why captains matter so much is because they influence behaviors within the team. And we'll continue to go forth here. And I think the next question that is important is to think about, are great leaders born or are they made? And I'd like to take this time for you all to just discuss that. Again, it's usually people fall between nature and nurture, and they're somewhere in between at some percentage. And I think that this question matters because it will drive the way you approach your process and the types of things that you do. If you believe that it's all nature, then it's very unlikely that you will take the steps required to develop further skill sets and learn more about leadership or other competencies that are required. So take some time, think about this, and talk about this as a unit, and we can move forward afterwards. The next framework I want to provide you is this thing that we call the 6 tenets of leadership. I'll go through these quickly. And the first is that everything rises and falls on leadership. And we talked about it last session, this aspect of that you matter. And there's research that backs that. And I think it's important that when we look at all the great programs, we see it quite frequently that, leadership and the right influence can really take a program to the next level. And so due to that, you really have to take ownership of the results that you're getting, extreme ownership. And the second is understanding this model called the law of the lid, which essentially states that our leadership skills fall anywhere between 0 and 10 on this scale. And if you are a 5, if you have a leadership skill set of 5, what that means is that your team will never be better than a 5. And ultimately, you're the one that is holding your team back, so to speak. And it really requires you to improve your leadership skills and take those, take these processes seriously that we're doing, and ultimately continue to try to grow and balance that, because that's a lot that's on your shoulders. You have to balance that with having some growth mentality, and that is the fact that you are human and that you will fail. But as long as you're learning from your failures, that's what we really care about. The second is that leadership is influence, right? Really understanding and defining what leadership is, that we talked about just a few minutes prior. There's a quote that says, "We get out of life who we are, not what we want." And I put that there because there's an important distinction I think needs to be made, and that is that you don't try and influence. You are an influencer. And there is a difference between what we do and who we are in many ways. And what we want to try to do is, and we'll talk about this in a couple more slides, is focus on figuring out how we can become more of an influencer. And the second piece here is realizing there's a difference between influence and manipulation, and that has to do with motives. And ultimately, people can feel and read these ulterior motives that individuals have. And influence at the end of the day is about having what is best for the team and your teammates. And as long as there is alignment there, then that's positive influence that's occurring. And we mentioned it previously, those that are influential are able to shape viewpoints, they challenge others and have crucial conversations, and finally, they model the way. The third tenet is that self-expression is the essence of leadership. And self-expression is this idea about understanding who we are and having an awareness of our strengths and our weaknesses, and then also being able to communicate that honestly. And so it's twofold there, both understanding who we are and being able to communicate. Plato says that an unexamined life is not worth living. And so I think that it's important that you take some time to really reflect, to try to understand who it is that you are. And 3 ways that I know to do that best is to journal, find a mentor, which your coach should be, and get into and find your way into mastermind groups of people that are like-minded, that are trying to grow, which hopefully these captain's councils can act as. And I mentioned it in this previous one, but just to continue on this thread of that there is a distinction between as you try to, it's not about leading, it's about becoming somebody who is a leader. And the best way to go about that is to not even think about it in a sense of leadership, but just trying to become who it is that we are and becoming ourselves. And that is it's a difficult idea to wrap your mind around, but the big reason that I am trying to communicate this, and I'm not doing a great job of it, but there is a difference between proving yourself and leading others. And a lot of times individuals get into this role to try and prove their self, that they try to get that out there and lead, instead of just trying to become who it is that they are and express their goals, wishes, and desires in terms of their strengths, that ultimately the byproduct of that is leadership and the ability to lead others. The fourth is that leadership is a choice. We talked a little bit about this question about nature, or is it nurture? Are great leaders born, or are they made? And in my opinion, I think that that's not something that we'll ever really know for sure. And we certainly don't know for sure now. And so the story that we tell ourselves matters. And since leadership is influence is much more tangible, and influence is really in many ways a skill. And And if we have this mindset that, it's great leaders are just born, then we never go through the right process and have the work ethic to develop and continue to develop skills that ultimately we can pull out of our leadership toolkit for different situations to use to influence others. Ultimately, we're all leaders because we all try to influence. Science says that we try to influence at least 5 people every single day. And everybody on your team is a leader. And what you as team captains need to do is choose daily to develop your leadership skills and to help your other athletes develop theirs as well. The second point I think is important here for this tenet is to realize that leadership is highly cognitive, and it really requires that you make good decisions. And we have a whole nother pipeline of training for that when it comes to how to optimize your decision making. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make the best decisions we can and have the right process so that we can be put into the best position with the highest probability of winning. And ultimately, you choose and have control over your process. Every single day, you make a choice to either improve your character skills, your character traits, or you choose to diminish the ones that you currently have. And so I think it's important that every day when you're waking up, again, back to this idea of belief number 2, that you're going to do this. You're going to will your team to win. And that is a choice that you make every single day. The 5th is that leadership is a service. This is really the heart of what leadership is. And ultimately, any great thing that we try to do requires sacrifice or trade-off between one thing or another. And we're constantly choosing trade-offs. And that's a service that we provide to others that ultimately makes us better. And I've worked with a lot of teams that have athletes that raise their hands to serve, but ultimately they do that because many of them just want to have it on their resume for their senior year before they go off to get a job. And that is really the wrong heart in which you should take and approach this, because ultimately your life isn't about your resume. It's really about who it is that you are. And we grow when we take the experiences that we have in front of us and commit to those and really try to serve in the best way we can. And ultimately, we gain a lot from that experience that shape who we are. And when it comes to prioritization, you always want to remember the team comes first, then your teammates, and then you are at the bottom there. And ultimately, a lot of people get those prioritizations mixed up. Some people have their self at the top, and then team and teammates. Some people have teammates over the team with them at the bottom, and all of that prioritization really impacts our decision making and fails to push us to the best position for our team to be in the best position it can to win. And then I have a quote here: the servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first, as opposed to wanting power, influence, fame, or wealth. And unfortunately, many people are looking for these aspects when they raise their hands to serve. And ultimately, what we want to remember is that our team and teammates should be, and just this desire for all of us to be the best we can be, should be the main goal and priority that you have. And finally is this idea for tenet number 6, that leadership is an art. And the reason I call these the 6 tenets is because tenets are much more, not just tangible, but they are more of just like a blueprint or framework. And laws are much more concrete. And ultimately, we need to realize that, there's a uniqueness to leadership, and we all can lead in different ways. And Warren Bennett says that in many ways, leadership is just this performance art, which I really like. So even though these are 6 tenets that hopefully is a framework that you'll be able to use to help you make better decisions, understand that there are many different types of leadership. There are, I feel like, hundreds of different leadership theories out there. And what you want to do ultimately is, I think if you have the right heart, you're trying to serve, that is the one core element you need. And ultimately from there, you'll be able to have a process that is going to be effective for you. And belief number 3 here is this idea that Mel Fisher had, that that the journey was worth it in the end. And I think that this is an important belief for you all too as team captains, because ultimately you're going to put a lot of time, effort, and resources, hopefully, into conducting yourself in accordance with what a team captain should be. And it's important that you realize that even if you ultimately fall short of your goal, that this process is important and that this journey is worth it. And just quickly, there's a quote here from Zig Ziglar that says that you will get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. I think that's really powerful. And I mentioned it in Tenet 5, that leadership is a service, and that ultimately the greatest amongst us will be the servant, the one who tries to serve others. And ultimately, I think that's what helps to develop who we are and the different skill sets and competencies. And at the end of this process, you will be better for it. And at the end of the day, that's all you can really ask. And for those team captains that are at a lower level, high school, maybe even college, there are coaches who understand that the power that internal leadership has for their programs. And so they are looking for individuals that not just have the skill, but also have the character and leadership. And so at the end of the day, if you have the right heart and you take this role seriously and ultimately try to serve your teammates in the best of your ability, that heart and the skills that you develop from that experience will ultimately help you gain a competitive advantage, I think, over others as well. And so the 3 beliefs, one more time, I think, as we finish off this session, is that you matter, you're a treasure for the team. Every single morning when you wake up, you have to have this aggressive stance that you will do what it takes. You will choose to win every single day. And the third is that at the end of this, all the pain, suffering, joys, this season is worth it. And hopefully throughout this process, you will transform into a better individual with more skill sets. So I'm excited to see where you all go throughout this season. I hope that this was useful for you. And we will see you back for session 3 in a few weeks.